Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nails and Beauty Talk, NFTs, Crypto and Web3. I'm your host, Asia the Bird. To have a very special guest with me today. She's an entrepreneur, mentor, and the host of CULTURE FACTOR NFT podcast. Please welcome Holly Shannon. Hello, Holly. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me, Asia. This is awesome.
You're most welcome. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off this interview by asking, where are you from and how'd you get started within podcasts? Like, tell us about your career.
Okay, well, I have a long career because I'm like an endurance athlete when it comes to work, but I'm from Connecticut actually originally and then moved to DC about a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
Um, in answer to sort of your second question, I fell into podcasting. I was actually a podcast junkie.
Mhm.
I was one of those like annoying friends that listened to all kinds of podcasts and would text you when I would find one that I thought you should listen to or an episode.
Right.
Which most of my family and friends did not really quite appreciate that, but
Mhm.
that was like what I did. And I had been always in business strategy, marketing, and those areas. And I had been working with a company on their content strategy and their user interface on their for their content for their website. I was working with, this company. They were a SaaS platform, and they were sort of building out this product that they had. And I came in and was doing the user interface,
Mhm.
and we decided to launch a podcast that would complement what the platform was serving, what they were selling.
Mhm.
So we had kind of finished the content. He was kind of focused more on the back end work of it. I had sort of done my part, so I said I'll jump on the podcast part. I'll launch that. So had
Mhm.
no experience. It was like April of 2020, like March, April, right in the middle of COVID. And I was like,
Mhm.
all right, I got this. So I went to YouTube University and studied up and took copious notes. And before I knew it, 3 weeks later, the podcast was born. We launched with like 4 episodes, 3 or 4 episodes, and I was off to the races. So that's how it kind of happened, a little bit by accident.
Wow, that's very interesting. Because like how I started my online show or my podcast was during the pandemic as well. It was like down like November 2020, like the Nails and Beauty Talk podcast, like interviewing nail artists, different illustrators, designers, fashion designers. Yeah, that like I kind of started around that around that time, the beginning of COVID.
What's
You know.
interesting is that you were working with all these artists. Did you find, like, because now you couldn't meet with them in person, right? So they were all immersed in their creative journey, kind of
Mhm.
solo in their homes. Like, how did that must have really made your interviews really powerful because they were probably very layered with emotions at the same time, I would think.
Yeah, right, exactly. I like to connect with other creatives like myself. Like I went to art school. I'm always an artist. I've been an artist since I was young. And also like into nails, illustration, and things like that. And I like to connect with other artists and especially put out voices that like, hey, like I never seen like, them being interviewed or I never seen them have a chance to, tell their story. So that's what I like to do with my podcast, but not only talk about or discuss their work, but I want them to share their story.
Yeah, and we all have so much in common. We probably have more in common than we don't. So,
Mhm.
listening to the stories of those people, right? Like you can really relate to that. Like you launching a podcast was probably not like even far off from what I did. So like we
Mhm.
kind of are all living some similar stories. So it's really nice when we can, highlight some of them, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Now you describe yourself as the Swiss Army knife in terms of business. Like, why did you call yourself the Swiss Army knife?
Well, I have a little bit of experience behind me. So I started off doing trade shows around the country,
Hmm.
conferences and receptions and so forth. I cut my teeth on, with 5-star properties, building out these events. Some of them were really large, like the National Hardware Show in the middle of Chicago. I was managing the logistics of like 60,000 people and then all the meeting space. So I had like a lot of experience doing
Mm,
that. Further on in my career, I ended up in sort of the other side of working with hotels, and I was in boutique hospitality, working for a hotel, building
mm,
out smaller retreats. So they were like the board level, C-suite level, very high touch, white glove. It was a very high end hotel.
mm,
And I learned so much on that because it was a more intimate setting. There was team building involved. You were working very closely with like founders and again, the C-suite. So it was very,
right.
it was kind of unique.
Mm,
After that, when I had my son, I actually built out my jewelry business, which I did for 10 plus years. I collaborated with designers, worked with a ton of different mediums from lost wax casting to precious metal clay to 3D printing, did all sorts of
mm,
stuff. Had a house fire that kind of ended that part of my career. It was very difficult to resurrect it.
wow.
Yeah, I got really busy building. I had to rebuild our home. I had a young child, so you pivot, right? You do what you have to do in the moment.
Right.
And then when I came out of all of that, I kind of leaned back in on my strategy and my marketing and my business side, and that's how I started. I actually started back working with hotels and helping them, and then
Mm,
working on creating the podcast and the content. And that sort of brought me here. So I've been doing the podcast now for 2 plus years.
mm,
Culture Factor has gone through a few different iterations over that time. I've rebranded it a couple times. And I've scaled it myself. It's a one woman show, probably like you too, just working really hard at it, working at the
mm,
craft. So yeah, that's what I do when I was in the middle of my podcast, in the middle of rebranding is when I wrote my book.
mm,
And now I've been really fortunate to sort of take some of that experience as a podcaster, as
mm,
an author, and just as a person who's been a Swiss Army knife in business
mm,
onto the stage, and be able to
mm,
talk about marketing in terms of Web2 and Web3, because I kind of bridge it. So there's my
mm.
long answer to why I would probably call myself a Swiss Army knife.
That's really interesting because when you think of a Swiss Army knife, it has those multiple knives. Like you look at the picture of a Swiss Army knife, so that's very very understandable. But I definitely want to talk about the jewelry design aspect of things. So, are you self taught? Did you go to jewelry school? Like, how did you get into like jewelry design? Were you self taught? Did you go to school for that?
I'm mostly self-taught. I
Mm,
had a really cool place about 30 minutes from my house when I lived in Connecticut, and
mm,
they had great teachers there. So if there was like a specific thing I wanted to learn,
mm,
like if I wanted to learn about bezel setting or I wanted to learn about lost wax casting or precious metal clay, I could go take like an immersive workshop, and then I
mm,
could go back to my studio at home, which was like a table
mm.
in the basement. It sounds much sexier than it really is, but like literally it was a table in the basement with all the tools. And I was able to, work on the craft and refine it and find my way through it.
Mm,
I would say it was mostly self-taught.
mm,
And I kind of got into it, as I said, I was home with my son. I wanted something that I could do from home. And this is probably going to sound like a weird story, but I had a belly piercing and I could not find a belly ring that looked cool, that wasn't like, Britney Spears with like lots of
mm.
rhinestones and dangly things, like it just wasn't me. Like I was not Britney Spears. So
Right.
I went about the task of creating a belly ring that I would want
Mm,
to personally wear.
mm,
And there was just a little boutique in town that offered to take some of my one of one pieces that I
mm.
created, including the belly rings. And she just started to do really well with it. And she started taking orders, and it kind of grew from there.
Wow, that's really, really cool. Now, did you work with like mostly like silver or gold, or did you work with both metals?
I worked with both metals. I started off in silver just because at the time it was inexpensive enough to play with. The price of silver did go up and it did change kind of the materials that I chose. But
Hmm.
yeah, I would say sterling was where I initiated a lot of my playing in the studio. And in time, like all of my collections were really different. Like
Hmm.
I really didn't have like a signature look.
Hmm.
So in a way that was good because it allowed me to explore a lot of different mediums and just create organically within it, like what spoke to me. But
Hmm.
I did go through a phase of working with gold to answer
Hmm.
the other part of your question because I really love gold.
Hmm.
So I did start doing a lot of like wire knotting with gold. I made some belly rings with it. I created pieces that I would say were more like that you would wear with the little black dress. You know, I called them my
Right.
LBD,
Hmm.
pieces. And so that was kind of cool to be able to, create things that were like a little more elegant. I actually have a piece that I share with some friends of mine that have gotten married
Hmm.
because it was these blue stones called blue marine topaz. And
Hmm.
so I've lent it so that it hits the something borrowed, something blue with some
Hmm.
of my friends. So that one
Right.
keeps going around.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, like, I don't know if you've been to the jewelry show in Chantilly, Virginia, because they hold that every year. And like looking at just the jewelry, like what people like make with silver and gold and working with topaz, sapphire, rubies, and it's even you can get like beads individually, you can get like the natural stones individually. Like it's really cool to see like, people do these creative things with jewelry.
I'll have to check it out. I have not been there, but to me that is like a playground for me. When I'm in there, I could just sort of pick up the stones and hold them in my hand. I love color and
Hmm.
sparkle, and I just love it. Sorry, very loud truck just walked by. Went by. Sorry. Yeah, I love those shows. My problem is that as I mentioned, I had to pack up my studio,
Hmm.
and it now is a little dispersed in storage. And I have a very small box here in DC with
Hmm.
some basic tools. Um, so I'm not really set up to create again. I know I will create again at some point, but
Hmm.
I'm not really, I live in an apartment in DC, and, this microphone in my podcasting studio is literally in the middle of my kitchen. So
Hmm.
um, I think if I opened a jewelry studio next to it, it might be grounds for divorce. I don't know.
But I definitely want to get into the podcasting. So you also mentor people in terms of how to start their own podcast. So what does like your whole mentoring in terms of podcasting, like what does that entail?
So, starting at like the highest level, because I've worked with corporate for as long as I have, and I sort of understand the um, the thought leadership conversation on a
Hmm.
very deep level, because I've worked very closely with like from Goldman Sachs to Harry Winston Jewelers, so like I understand the mindset and what the goal, the overall goal is. So when I build a branded podcast for a business, I work alongside them building out the infrastructure, but at the same time, I really dive into what is their overall goal? Like, is it to put different people within their company on the stage and get
Hmm.
notoriety, and put them out as keynote speakers so that they're seen as leaders in the space? Is their
Hmm.
goal to get lead generation to their website so that they can have warm sales leads for their workforce so that they don't have to hunt it down?
Hmm.
What's the goal? Are they looking to create a paid mastermind and they want to build that up? Are they looking for partnerships, like the people that they're going to be interviewing, that maybe they'd be doing business with them?
Hmm.
So I think I'm really well suited for that, and enjoy doing that for companies because I understand what the goal is, and I usually come in on retainer. Like there'll be a flat fee, and then I'll go on retainer and help them build
Mhm.
out the seasons. We'll run a season and see if it landed, like if it created sort of the momentum that they wanted, and then we recalibrate if necessary. But that
Mhm.
would probably be the highest level. The next tier down would be more on a consultative level. So if an individual or a smaller business wants to start a podcast, I walk them through, help them build the infrastructure, launch it. I'm by their side. It's an hourly rate. I pretty much walk away when they're done because then they're off to the races, right?
Right.
And then the third way would be the book. Somebody, it's do it yourself. They buy the book, Zero to Podcast, on Amazon, and it's a short book. I literally, it's like there's 60 pages in here that revolve around helping them. There's no
Mhm.
fluff. There's no fluff in it. There might be a little bit of motivational speaking in there just to keep them on track and excited about the process, but it's
Right.
really, it's the meat and bones of getting it done and getting it done as
Mhm.
fast as somebody wants to, whether it's a weekend or 3 weeks or 3 months. And then they can hire me hourly if they just need a little bit of help along the way.
Mhm.
The last thing that I do, and unfortunately I have not been able to do it as of late, is I used to mentor a lot in Clubhouse, where I met your father,
Mhm.
and also in Twitter Spaces. And I would just be there answering questions for people and guiding them as best I could.
Mhm.
That unfortunately has fallen off of my ability, off the radar, off the calendar, because I just have been traveling a lot speaking, so I just haven't had the chance. But that's kind of
Mhm.
essentially the different levels.
Oh, cool, cool. Now tell us about the Culture Factor podcast. Like what topics do you cover? Is it NFTs? Like what other topics do you cover?
So, Culture Factor was born in the conversation around company culture from the C suite. That was the
Mhm.
original way that it started, but it started during COVID, right? So,
Mhm.
everybody was work from home. So, the conversation really was very deep and took three directions most of the time: mental health, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the gig economy that emerged from the Great Resignation. I found myself rebranding the show at about episode 25
Mhm.
because now there were so many emerging leaders. And I
Mhm.
didn't want to just interview the C suite, I wanted to interview others. And now, flash forward to where Culture Factor is now. I spoke to so many creators in the gig economy that I got kind of excited about Web3,
Mhm.
and I got Web3 curious, and officially NFT confused, and all of that. And as an artist and as a podcaster, I felt that I was well suited to kind of dive into this conversation, that I could talk
Right.
with artists easily, having been one. I could talk to businesses that are building platforms in this space because I'd
Right.
already done that. So the show really focuses on that. And when I was speaking at NFT NYC last week, and one of the things I realized, and I shouted this out to the audience: 98% of the world doesn't talk like we do. When we sit in these rooms that discuss NFTs and Web3, it's like a whole new vernacular. So if you're
Right.
tired of explaining to your family and friends what an NFT is, or what a DAO is, or any of that language that feels really foreign, send them
Mhm.
to my show. Save yourself the aggravation, because I'm learning with my listeners and I'm asking all of those questions.
Right, exactly. Now tell us about like the Culture Factor NFTs. Like how did you get started with those?
So that brings my jewelry back in. So I had interviewed this amazing couple, Elizabeth and Jason Franklin, on my show. It was a marriage of art and code. So she was the
Hmm.
artist and he did the code work behind the scenes. And they created a collection called the Dreamy Geeks.
Mm,
And they were just good people. You know, I collect good people. That's the other thing that I do as a hobby.
right.
And they both were really amazing. And I reached out to them and said, you know, I would really love to go through the process. I think that it would be great for my show to be able to explain the process a little bit more deeply if I
Right.
go under the hood and do it with somebody. Because, you know, that's what Swiss
Hmm.
Army knives do. They learn everything as they go.
Right.
So I asked them and they said, sure. And so she built out like the avatars with a little bit of, you know, like what I wanted to see in them in terms of
Hmm.
hair and colors and, you know, just different things. And all of the avatars have a Culture Factor shirt on in my color. So it's branded with Culture Factor.
Hmm.
But what was really cool, and probably the part I love the most, is I sent her the original pictures of my jewelry. So when it was
Hmm.
physical, or as they say in the business, phygital,
Hmm.
I sent her my 3D printed hummingbird, my I'm sorry, this was precious metal clay, my 3D printed honeycomb cuff bracelet, my
Hmm.
earrings, you know, all the different things I created. And she built them in as traits on
Wow.
there. So, yeah, so when you mint.hollyshannon.com, you get an NFT that features my podcast. So, hopefully, you share the love a little bit. And you also get to see my jewelry. So what was interesting to me when I had the house fire, I had to, close my business and it was a
Hmm.
physical artwork. Now my legacy is living on the blockchain, which is so freaking
Wow.
awesome for me. And I'm probably going to go one step further if I'm fortunate enough to sell the NFTs. I will probably work on putting the jewelry as wearables in the metaverse. So
Mm.
it'll live on even further than just legacy on blockchain. It'll have another life in, say, a game or just
Hmm.
somebody's avatar when they're in Decentraland or wherever. So it's a journey. I'm on it.
Yeah, that's very, very cool because, and I like the idea of having your jewelry like into like the metaverse because that's what Meta Golden, kind of does. Like they have their own line of jewelry and it's like 3D jewelry that they do like in terms of like the metaverse, I believe. And the thing is, what I like about what you said about the culture factor is like a utility. So it's not just an NFT in itself, but it's something that you get with the NFT. So that's very, very cool because it'd be cool like, for your jewelry to not only be in the Decentraland, but also in Sandbox. The Sandbox and the Decentraland is like the popular thing. Then you got like crypto voxels and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I would love to get to that point, and I think I will. I've also had a few offers to have my podcast in those spaces as well,
Mm-hmm.
broadcast so people can, sit down in the sandbox, if you will, and catch an episode.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I have lots of interesting plans on chain. And hopefully I can realize that in the future as we grow in this new space.
Yeah, right, exactly. Even I'm still learning about the NFT and Web3 space. I'm still at the beginner, like, spring chicken stage. So, it's a lot to learn, but it's very rewarding. And it's very, very cool, as you learn more about this stuff.
I agree, Asia. I'll be honest with you. I feel like I'm spring chicken every day with it because it keeps evolving, and
Mm,
I think what we learn about it keeps changing. So, like, I think we kind of all are. I almost feel like if anybody says they're an expert, I'm kind of like I want to walk the other direction because I really don't think anybody is an expert. in this. I think
Right.
a lot of people in Web2 have moved into this space because they
Hmm.
realize how brands can benefit from a strategy that is heavily hinged in both places. Like, I don't think they will be one or the other. I
Hmm.
think that they need to be both. So
Hmm.
I think that people are learning as they go, and I probably would trust people in the business
Hmm.
more if they said, I'm still learning, but I'm going to do my level best to help you with a strategy that evolves with it. So,
Yeah, right, exactly. And when I first learned about it, I learned about it like back in March, like near the end of March, I think, into April, learning about what NFTs are and things like that. But really, it was like I think it was like last year because it was this nail artist. Her name is Gracie J, and she's in Brooklyn, New York, and but she goes by the editorial nail on Instagram, and she has very great nail content. She does nails very very well, and she messaged me and she said, "Have you heard of NFTs?" And I was like, "No." And she was explaining to me what NFTs were, and I didn't think too much about it at the time, but my dad was, getting into learning about NFTs and Web3, and that's how I got into it. So then, of course, we got into NFT tips, and of course, that's not there anymore. And I think that's how, we learned about you and different people in the space. I was learning about NFTs and Web3. So yeah, like you would think like that you're late to the game, but it's like from Eddie Gangland, to other people saying like this is still brand new.
it is. It absolutely is. And being in New York at NFT NYC, it actually made it more obvious to me because
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many people I have talked to that have no idea what we're talking about, Asia. No clue. They've never heard the words. They're like, what's an NFT? And how many times have we said what it is and described it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it is still very interesting to me how many people don't know about this, which is great because it gives
Mm-hmm.
us a chance to be able to clarify, a way of speaking about it that
Mm-hmm.
lands that people can really absorb and decide, to use for themselves in business or for their
Mm-hmm.
art. Do you make NFTs that are based on like your nail art or anything like that?
Now, me personally, I don't have any NFTs out as of right now. I'm just learning about the space before I jump into it.
Fair.
So that's the thing. I definitely just want to take my time just learning more about it over time. And that's why I interview people that are involved in NFTs and Web3s, because they help me understand what the spaces is about, like, things that I should be aware of and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say surround yourself with people who feel very genuine to you. That
Mm-hmm.
when they're sharing the information, it's not to block you out of this space. It's to invite
Mm-hmm.
you in and to help you learn. Whether it's through podcasts, whether it's through a social audio room,
Mm-hmm.
through your interviews. And just, I would say like take chances. Like, I mean, I always wanted to do an NFT because I was an artist. Like, I always thought like, well, this is a natural transition. But I was a multimedia artist, so I was always thinking, oh, my photography will end up being on
Mm-hmm.
there. That's what my thought process was the whole time.
Right.
And then when I spoke with Elizabeth and Jason, I was kind of like, well, wait, like maybe there's something else here. Maybe I need little people on the avatars that have culture factor and they can share the good word about my show. Like if they like the show, they'd be supporting it. I mean that
Mm-hmm.
any money that I make gets to go back into the show because I'm a one woman show. I've been doing it all myself. So I was kind of psyched. And then with the jewelry, I felt like, wow, when I added that in, I'm like, no, this is really full circle for me because it's all of Holly Shannon now. Like you're seeing it
Mm-hmm.
all on there. So I'm hoping
Right.
one day I'm going to see lots of little avatars in Instagram and Twitter that are from my collection just to see the visual support. Because
Mm-hmm.
like you just don't know who's listening. Like I didn't know your father was listening and shared me with you. Like that's so cool. Like, and sometimes you don't know that till
Right.
months later. I mean, it's probably been months since I talked with him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is really, really cool. Now I want to get into in terms of NFTs. So what is like a DAO and how does it play a role with NFTs?
So it is a decentralized autonomous organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a good way to aggregate or collect a group of people that are like-minded around a project, excited about a project. They want to get behind that particular project. And it allows them to be like a governing body, if you will, but
Mm-hmm.
from the place of seeing it succeed and contributing to the ideas even or the growth. You know, it might be an NFT, and they get to contribute towards the utilities that are chosen. Maybe they get to vote on part of the roadmap that's in
Mm-hmm.
place on it.
Right.
So it's a really interesting setup, and I kind of liken it to building like an organic community around something you care about. Like, say, for example, you're at school with your kid and
Mm-hmm.
you want to raise money for, I don't know, getting books into the hands of children at the school that couldn't afford them or something like that. And so
Right.
you get a group of people together, and how are you going to do that? You decide that you're going to do like a 5K where
Mm-hmm.
people can run, walk, and they get people to sponsor them for each mile or each kilometer, and then that money goes towards the books. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a decentralized autonomous art organization. And I
Mm-hmm.
like to sort of make those analogies because there's a lot of acronyms in this
Mm-hmm.
market, in the NFT market. I mean, NFT is an acronym. Um,
Right.
there's so many of them, and it's scary to people. But if you kind of break them down a little bit, they're really Web 1
Mm-hmm.
concepts in Web 3.
Mm-hmm. Is smart contract like a Web 1 concept too, or is that like a Web 3 concept?
I would say it's more Web 3 because it's born of the idea of using blockchain technology.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are buying an NFT and you are using the Ethereum network, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's on a blockchain, and each end, the buyer and the seller have a hash on this blockchain or this ledger, for another way to put it, like if you think of an accounting ledger,
Mm-hmm.
and it's built in there. So I create an NFT, I create a contract within it,
Mm-hmm.
and it tells, what percent each person is getting,
Mm-hmm.
what the, maybe it's the a percentage for the person who built it, maybe
Right.
it's a percentage for the goal, maybe there's
Mm-hmm.
percentages for the utilities, maybe there's a percentage for social good. I build that out when I make that. Okay, that is my smart contract I'm putting together. And then
Mm-hmm.
when somebody buys it, they become part of the smart contract relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they have, they bought it, they own it, they're on the blockchain with me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's direct, it's peer to peer. And they now assume a piece of that. Now, the smart contract goes one step further. If they say, oh, hey, you know what? I'm kind of ready to sell this one, which there's nothing wrong with doing that. They decide to flip the Holly Shannon NFT because they
Mm-hmm.
see that I'm growing and scaling, and they say, hey, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
She's really built herself up, and we're going to sell it because we've been behind her, and we're just going to stay on her journey. But they
Mm-hmm.
sell it, and what happens is the next person that buys it gets keeps that money for that person, that first person who bought it, but there's legacy built into that smart contract. So there was that percentage that went to the original builder and
Mm-hmm.
maybe part of the utility. So it ends up becoming legacy.
Right.
So I hope I didn't make this too confusing, but essentially the smart contract is a peer-to-peer relationship between buyer and seller, and the originator of it builds in the parameters, the percentages, and how that's going to work. And the person buying it absorbs that, especially if they sell it to somebody else.
Mhm. Yeah, right. But I also want to get into crypto wallets. So, what are some advice you would give for people who want to have their own crypto wallet, buy NFTs, or invest in NFTs?
Okay, so the famous line you hear all over Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces is don't take financial advice from me because I'm not in that business. And,
Mhm.
don't make decisions based on, don't make decisions to choose wallets or buy Bitcoin or Ethereum based on anything I say because I'm not a
Mhm.
financial advisor and I don't profess to be.
Mhm.
But what I would say is there are a lot of wallets out there now. And if you want to get into doing that, very few transactions use fiat or US dollars at this
Mhm.
point. So if you want to jump in, you will need a wallet. I have a few. So if that means anything, I've spread my money, my cryptocurrency out in 3 different platforms. So I use Coinbase, I use Exodus, and I use shoot, what was the other one? There's another one. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of it at the moment, but
It's okay.
I have 3 wallets,
Mhm.
and some of that money I transferred also into my MetaMask. And the
Mhm.
MetaMask wallet allows you to make purchases on OpenSea and buy NFT art. And OpenSea is a bit of, like I call it, like the Amazon platform of NFTs, for lack of a
Mhm.
better way to put it. There are other places to buy NFTs. You can easily go on people's websites where they've built in a DApp,
Mhm.
a decentralized application that allows you to go in and buy it directly. But you still, more often than not, need that MetaMask wallet to in between.
Mm. That's very interesting. Now, how does one keep like their wallet or their NFT secure?
Well, that is the $1 million question because a lot of people have been hacked, right?
Mhm.
That's a tough one. You know, I they always say don't share any of your secret phrases. With each wallet you open, you're going to have your username, you're going to have a password, and then you're going to have a 12 phrase secret authentication that
Yeah,
only
key
you
phrase.
know. Yeah, the secret phrases, and they're going to be like random words like, like shirt, cover, book, wallet, picture. They're going to be like random words.
Mhm.
And they say, keep it someplace safe
Right.
that nobody knows where it is. So, have a notebook, handwrite it, don't share it with people. There are cold wallets that you could buy where you lock the phrase in this like metal wallet and, it's safe from like fire or whatever. There's a lot of different things. What works best? I'm not sure. I'm really not. I'm
Mm.
not going to lie. I don't know. Um, you can handwrite it. You can decide that you are going to share it with somebody, or you can decide you're not. Like, you can get a
Right.
cold wallet where you
Mhm.
have it inscribed on metal and you burn anything you have written it on.
Mhm.
I would probably say don't take screenshots of it. Don't, if you're in a public place like an airport or a conference, I would not leave your computer open with those apps open that they might be able
Right.
to get in. I would say always close those. If you're at like a hotel, I would say shut down your computer at night and put it in the safe that they have in there so
Mhm.
that hackers can't get at it. But I would probably end with saying that hackers lived in Web 2 as much as
Mhm.
they live in Web 3. So if you think that this is unique, they are unique products now, like NFTs and all of these wallets that people are getting into. But it's, make no
Mhm.
mistake, it's no different than having your identity stolen in Web 2, which happened to us. And we had to go through the IRS and we had to, like,
Wow.
work with our taxes because we got like some random check that was sent to us because
Mm,
somebody hacked in. So it can happen, you know. Web 1 was when people used to go into people's mailboxes and steal those credit card applications and then hack into your identity and spend money but with your name on it, and then you were accountable to that. So
mm,
hackers are everywhere. I don't have the solution on how to stay safe,
hmm.
but I think just taking whatever measures feel right to you are the ones that you should take.
Right. I definitely want to ask about the wallets. Like, what are like some types of like different wallets besides like a cold wallet?
Well, the wallets I spoke with are the warm wallets, so that would be like the
Oh, okay.
Coinbase or the Exodus. I had some names of cold wallets. I would have to look them up because I actually have not used that.
Mhm.
So I would have to look up. I've been taking notes from talking with people, and I know that there's some cold wallets that are considered quite reputable. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't have it handy. I'm sorry.
No,
I
it's
could forward it to you if you want to add it to the show notes. You can say Holly sent me these after. But again, this is
mm,
not advice from me. Like they're, you know, listen and learn and do the research you need to. Go onto these websites and do the research and ask people in the space and confirm that it meets the criteria of your research. You know, you guys are smart. Like we're all smart people. Like just go in and do the research. Don't wait for somebody to tell you what to do,
mhm.
and then make the decision. And yeah, so that's what I would say.
Cool, cool. Now, in terms of with business and marketing, in terms of NFTs, like what are some pieces of advice you can give for someone who wants to promote their one of one NFTs or NFT collection, you know, in terms of just like having to work out there and saying, yo, this is what I offer. These are my NFTs. This is how much I charge.
Yeah, you know, I think social audio has proved to be a mainstay in your
Mm-hmm.
ability to share your story or to shill your NFT, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And I would encourage people to use those platforms if you're comfortable enough using your voice. I think there's a lot to be said about showing up. There's a lot to be said about articulating your story in your voice. I resonate on a different level when somebody comes onto that virtual stage in social audio and tells me like why they created what they created. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just feels really special, right? I'm sure you've heard that too. Like when you interview people on your podcast that are artists, you know, and you get to hear their story, it's just different, right? It vibrates
Right.
on a different level with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say if you're not comfortable doing that, you probably would have to come up with some sort of campaign on social media, whether that's like an Instagram or Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that those are the two platforms I see used the most by people who want to share their NFT stories. And then, you know, I think also there's a different conversation for a one of one artist versus somebody who has a generative collection, which was the beginning of your question.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really hard for one of one artists because that's everything for them. Like it's that one piece.
Right.
And so the idea of creating Discord channels and, you know, sharing their story and doing the content for it, it's hard.
Right.
It's really hard as an artist, and it breaks into the creative juices that you have when you just want to create those one of ones.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find somebody that is really good at helping you share your story, you know, maybe you can find somebody who would do some of that for you, that would go on social audio and share your story.
Mm-hmm.
If you are doing a generative collection, then you probably have collaborated and worked with some other people. I'm assuming. I probably shouldn't assume that, but like in my case, I collaborated for my generative collection. So you might be able to
Mm-hmm.
get like a small community that uses their voice together on all of the platforms.
Mm-hmm.
There's no right or wrong way. I've chosen not to do Discord channel. I just don't like it. To me, it's a bit like a Slack
Mm-hmm.
channel. I think it's noisy. I think it's like too much for me. It makes me a little nuts.
Hmm.
I'm signed up to a ton of Discord channels I never show up to. As nice as the communities are, I just don't have the bandwidth. So
Hmm.
you gotta do what works for you, right?
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. Now, when it comes down to having like an NFT collection, when you have a team, like how important is it to have like a roadmap? Like what is that whole process of having like an NFT collection? Like, how does that work?
So for me, as I said, I did a collaboration and I found somebody who was very comfortable using Photoshop.
Mm,
Procreate is another platform that's used for developing art on
mm,
there for NFT use. I just, I was lucky. I stumbled on this great story of this husband and wife, and it kept
mm,
sort of, knocking at my back door in my head. And
mm,
one day I just kind of approached them and had the conversation, and the timing was right for both of us. They were in between projects and able to help a little bit.
mm,
So the process for us was really just meeting on a regular basis, really discussing deeply what my overall vision was. And actually, the jewelry being added to it came later. But
mm,
thankfully, it was at a point where we were adding elements and traits to the
mm,
NFT that it worked.
mm,
But yeah, I mean, I worked many evenings with Jason, integrating with my website, taking different apps that were needed
mm,
to build it out. So it was very hands on for me as well, in going through the process in the creative and then in the infrastructure of building it into my website and so forth. I'm agile enough on there that I was able to work with him on it, but you're incorporating domains. So you're on
right,
GoDaddy, you're on Pinata, you're on all these different things, building it
right.
out. But
Mm,
I was definitely part of that process in building the whole thing. I will not take credit for the artistry of Elizabeth. I mean, she created all that, and I was like, yes, I like that. Can we add this? To me, that's more collaborative on my part as opposed to creative. She was definitely the creative behind that, so I give her 100% of that. Um,
mm,
and as for Jason, I give him 100% of the back end work, the developer work that went into there.
mm,
That I'm not skilled in that, but I was able to come in and do elements and to understand how it gets integrated in. So I would
mm,
say find people that
right.
you want to work with, if you want to build a generative collection, because it is a big process and it's much more enjoyable and easier with a team.
Mm, right, exactly. Now, what are some things that you found very interesting, or what are some things that stood out to you being involved in NFTs and Web3?
That it is a very creative environment.
Mm,
It's really out there in some places. Like some of it is like, wow, can't
right.
even go there. I don't even understand it. Like I see some art and it's just like, whoosh, like way over my head.
Mm,
But I think that that is always in life. Like if you go to a gallery, a physical gallery or
mm,
something like that, and you walk through there, some of the art is really going to resonate with you, and you're going to sit in front of it and
mm,
absorb it, and it's going to live in your dreams, right? And
mm,
sometimes you go in front of stuff and you're like, I absolutely don't get that. What is that?
right.
So I would say for me, the experience is the same for NFT art. Some stuff I see and I'm like blown away. Like I
Mm,
met this artist when I was at NFT NYC, and his name is Jeremy Cowart, and he
mm,
is a phenomenal photographer, and
mm,
his work is so great, and
mm,
his NFT is so cool. I didn't expect his NFT to be what it was when
Mm-hmm.
I looked at his photography, they were very, very different, because he does a lot of portrait work, and both things resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of artists out there doing some cool stuff. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. That's cool because like what I've been seeing, within NFTs and the Web3 space, getting into like, Clubhouse, some of them was talking about NFTs, but also get into Connect Club. That's another platform where people talk about NFTs, the metaverse and things like that. Like the world is your oyster with NFTs. Like it doesn't just limit to physical, contemporary art. It can also be photography, music. I've heard certain collections like Laid Back Llamas and the Smirks. The Smirks I fell in love with. I love how like their collection is very fun, but it also has like this streetwear fashion type of vibe. And like a lot of the characters that they create, these 3D NFTs that they have, they could be dolls. They could be like on a shirt. They can like it's like a whole streetwear line that they could have. Like it's just so cool.
Yeah, I love that. Your whole face lit up when you're talking about it. There's they call this also twinning, where there is the digital and the phygital. So
Mm-hmm.
in your case, like the digital art is really resonating with you. At some point, they might be creating physical items like, hoodies and hats and dolls and different things that you can buy, so that like the NFT art that you have, that maybe you're just holding on to or is becoming your avatar on Twitter, or you decide to, print out, and put on your wall, is now living in how you share yourself out in public. So maybe you have that hoodie on because that really represents art that you love,
Mm-hmm.
and it's how you dress. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a pair of
Right.
kicks, like maybe, like for me, I have not moved my NFT art into physical yet.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, the jewelry was physical and now it's digital. So I kind of worked in the reverse.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it'll become something else, but I know that I have like Culture Factor swag and I have Zero to Podcast swag on my website. So
Mm-hmm.
eventually, I think I will have that, because like just how that NFT, how that collection and that artist resonated with you, wouldn't you just like love to wear it as well? Like, wouldn't you love to
Yeah.
represent, right?
Right. Yeah. Like their stuff, like the Smirk stuff is really, really cool. I like their 3D NFTs. They're really, really cool. But also too, I just did an interview with Sarah Atafa. Like her work is phenomenal. Like her work is like very futuristic, very, very like dreamy landscapes, surrealism. I really like her work. Also, like there's another NFT collection called Power of Women, World of Women. That's the big collection. Then there's Nyla Hayes with the long necky ladies.
Mhm.
So, it's really cool to see that, women, other people from different walks of life are getting involved into the space.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. And I think there's just some really cool stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really loving the art too, and I'm loving the different types of NFTs that are out there. Some are strictly for the art, and
Mm-hmm.
some have a higher purpose. Like I interviewed this one guy that is having the first NFT that will be a feature film. So you would be
Mm-hmm.
buying the NFT, and it has art that's related to it. They have these Arabian camels that are part of
Mm-hmm.
the art, and they're kind of funky.
Right.
But you are actually buying into the project, where like you would be a part of the movie. Like it has that DAO we spoke about, where you'd
Right.
be able to, vote on some of the casting decisions that are made, or some of the location where they're going to shoot. You might be able to make, like they'll have a vote on that. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some NFTs that have a completely different personality than what you're talking about, where like,
Mm-hmm.
World of Women or the Neckies or something like that, where it's really
Right.
just the art. So and the music ones are a completely different thing too. Like that's a
Right.
different NFT iteration as well. So I think it has a lot of cool applications for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so crazy like how, it started with Web 1 and now we're heading towards like Web3. I don't know if you heard about with the co-founder of Twitter, like Mark Dorsey building Web5. Like, do you know anything about that possibly?
No, I don't actually, but I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I found that very, very interesting. Like how is we're getting to Web3 is like how we get into Web5.
Yeah, why did we just leap over four? Poor number four. Like, what's so bad about it?
I just find that so interesting. And the thing is like with Web 1, from what I've heard, from what I understood, was like this, the internet was like just about reading, and then Web 2 was mainly about like social media and typing and writing. And now we're heading towards like Web 3, where it's like more into like metaverse type of vibe, like audio. Like the thing with Twitter space, like too, like, when the person talks, like the text automatically comes up. I find that to be really, really interesting. So I think we're also getting a little bit towards like AI as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're 1,000% right on all of that. And what I would say is that I had a conversation with Vlad Ginslav from Block Party, and we actually had this conversation about the differences in all the platforms. And you did a great description, so I won't reiterate or come up with another way of saying it. But what I would say is I think that there's a lot of character in Web 1 that
Mhm.
apply to how we work in Web 3. And most specifically, I would say it's how we build community, which seems to be the buzzword for most people is build community, right? And
Right.
they're going to help share your story. I think we could learn a lot from Web 1, like from our grandparents and
Mhm.
our parents, and how they built up community. It was a different way. They didn't have any of the tools that we have now. So
Right.
it was showing up at that 5K race to raise
Mhm.
money for the children. It was a bunch of people getting together and volunteering
Mhm.
to create that, right? And there's a lot of people
Right.
getting together and volunteering to build community on Discord. It's kind of the same thing. One
Right.
was IRL and one is on Discord, right?
Mhm.
But I think some of the methodologies and some of the mindset
Right.
behind building it, and how you reach out to people, how are church organizations building it, how is your local YMC building community, how are they getting these groups of people there? It's
Mhm.
no accident that they've
Right.
got a congregation of 500 people. Well, let me tell you something. If you can build a Discord channel where you had 500 active people that showed up,
Mhm.
sorry, my clock has been bringing through this whole thing. I should have shut it off. I'm so sorry.
It's fine.
So, you know, there's a lot that you could learn. Sit down with your
Mhm.
parents, sit down with your grandparents, and say, when you were trying to get people involved, like, what did you
Mhm.
do? Like, how did you share that story? And, you might get bits and pieces, and you might not get tactical ways like it,
Mhm.
going to the church and doing XYZ. It might not be like physical, but some of them, the mentality behind it, some of the call to action, the CTAs that they used
Right.
then, have those conversations. I think actually tools from Web 1 are still highly viable in Web 3.
I find it very interesting, because like with NFTs and Web 3, it's like in the art into music, but I don't see it very much within the beauty industry. Like I see it like in within fashion, like people are doing like 3D fashion pieces, fashion illustrations as NFTs. And the thing is, I don't see NFTs, as much into like the beauty industry, because this is what I want to do with my platform is to, spread awareness about NFTs and Web 3 and how people can get involved in the beauty industry, within the NFT and Web3 space, whether they're nail artists, whether they're hairstylists, whether they're makeup artists, special effects, makeup artists and things like that. Cause that'd be something really interesting to see too.
I agree with you. I think that you probably are going to be the person that creates that, and it might be a model that other people emulate. I'm thinking for you, like what comes to mind when you say that, if I was to think strategy for you, um, I would say that I wonder if like a creator coin on like a rally.io would be
Mm,
something where you would create an NFT that represents your brand, right?
right.
And maybe you create like a collection, even a small
Mhm.
generative art collection, and maybe it's a hand with like the nail art, for
Mhm.
example. It could be anything. Maybe, it could be just the eye with the eyeshadow and different whatever. But let's just say it's the
Right.
hand. And you have, 100 different hands with different nail art that's on it that you build out. Maybe they're photographs, maybe they're just all JPEGs, like however you do that.
Mhm.
And someone would buy it, and the utility that you release is maybe a creator coin that they could
Mm.
use as a loyalty reward, so that when they come to get their nails done with you, they can use that creator coin, and maybe they get like two nails with specific nail art, like, maybe it's like their ring finger has like a little piece of nail art, and so they're
Mhm.
sort of buying into your little economy that you create around that. It's a little clunky, I know what I'm talking about, but I think
Mm.
you probably can see like how you can play into
Mhm.
how they would support you, and see like if something like that could work for you. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting idea. But I do want to switch gears and talk about in terms of women being in the NFT and Web3 space. So why do you think, what are some reasons you think that women should get involved in NFTs and Web3?
Oh gosh, that is such a great question. So, it is primarily men. It actually emulates or not emulates, but mirrors the VC industry, the venture capital industry,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot of male.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think there's a lot of men that are in this space that are very supportive of women, and make plenty of room for them. So I'm not saying that that's a bad thing that there's men there, but I
Mm-hmm.
think we are at a point in time where it's so new that it's actually a great time to jump in and change those numbers a little bit.
Right.
And if COVID taught us anything, um, there was an article a while back on, I think it was in Thrive Global, with Ariana Huffington
Mm-hmm.
and Melinda Gates, how
Mm-hmm.
they talked about COVID set women back 250 years with gender parity in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Web3 is an opportunity to shrink that gender parity. I think now is an opportunity for people to come in when it's so new and
Mm-hmm.
learn it. And what else I would probably say is I think most women, or women who identify as women, have very powerful and large quantities of EQ. They're very empathetic. They have
Mm-hmm.
they resonate with a high emotional quotient, EQ, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the industry needs that. Like, I think we need that love, we need that community, we need
Mm-hmm.
the empathy, we need the
Right.
heart and the love, and women bring that. Like, now
Right.
I think more than ever is an opportunity. You might have to bump your way a little bit through some of the people who are more assertive in the space,
Mm-hmm.
because, as I said, it is still dominated by men,
Mm-hmm.
but you will find your spot. And there's a lot of giving, warm, loving, inviting people in the space that
Mm-hmm.
will get behind you.
Right.
So I would say yes, yes, yes. Jump into Web3, change that dynamic, shrink the gender parity, be a part of changing the world
Right.
and growing yourself into Web3 marketing. That's what I would say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's very well put. I think women, if anything, should get involved into the space because I think this is like how you said, it's a perfect time for us to get involved and to, express our creativity and what we do. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's our superpower. I say it all the time. My
Right.
EQ is my superpower. Like it,
Right.
I used to look at it as a negative thing when I was in business. I used to be like,
Mhm.
oh, I take things, I'm sensitive, you know,
Right.
and I used to think, well, I got to learn to, temper that. I have to learn to, grow a harder shell. I need
Yeah, tough
to.
skin.
Right, right. I need to be like, what is it? Like a duck and let it roll off my back,
That
when
water for
somebody,
ducks back.
yeah, yeah. But now, as I've gotten older, like I realize it's truly my superpower.
Hmm.
My ability to vibrate in a room with people and to see like where where the love is, where the creativity is, and not all of the hype. Like
Right.
I can feel the difference in the room. I can be in a group of people and I can tell the people that are really making things happen and creating from the heart, and those who are gamers, like I'm sorry,
Hmm.
not playing game like with a joystick, but that like
Right.
they're hype. They're gaming the system. They're jumping in at this unique time to make a quick buck and leave. I can smell those people in the room in 2 seconds flat.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's a strength, and I think most people, especially women, and
Hmm.
have that. That's my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with your opinion because I'm kind of the same way. Like I have like, sensitivity about me, but of course, like people would say, especially in society, it's so pushed so much to have tough skin. And of course, yeah, it has some sort of like grit and tough skin, but I think there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable or being sensitive, but I'm like you as well. Like, I've practiced with, and I'm only 25. So I've practiced learning to like sit back and observe and sometimes pick up patterns with people. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And the more you get to know them, the more you pick up, people patterns.
Yeah, I agree. And I can tell that you're a good student of it because as a podcaster, you have to be an active listener. Like you have to really be in the moment with the people you're interviewing and
Mm-hmm.
pick up on cues and things they're talking about. And you've done that. So you're doing the work and it shows just even in our interview together. So
Mm-hmm.
I would bet you're doing it in the room as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. Now, how would you define success in your personal perspective?
Oh, that is a tough question, Asia. So, you know, I'm not going to lie. I think that we all look at metrics
Mm-hmm.
to help us understand where we're doing good, like where we're succeeding.
Right.
My show, I've been scaling it myself this entire time.
Right.
I have been the person working it,
Mm-hmm.
changing my craft, improving my craft, showing up at shows, learning how to iterate and change what I'm doing and things that aren't working, talking with people. And I've scaled my show actually in the past couple weeks. I got it up to the top 1.5%, which is really huge for me. And that's a
Yeah.
metric that I associate with success.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to look on an intrinsic level, if I were to look inside the heart, I would say, watching my son crush it in life and do really amazing things and really explore his personality and build great friendships and love and do well.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is also a measurement of success. And I don't need to tell anybody, oh, he goes to this school or he does this or he, whatever.
Right.
The fact that I know in my heart of hearts that he is experiencing his best possible life and growing into
Mm-hmm.
um, just this, amazing person is success for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I have very different measurements. And I think in this social media ridden world, it's hard to stop and appreciate those
Mm-hmm.
intrinsic successes
Right.
and the true meaning of life because we get caught up in those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that some of those numbers do matter in terms of validating that you're on the right track and doing the right thing for yourself.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's where mental health comes into play. And I like how now it's getting highlighted more about mental health and how important that is. Because like how you said with social media, like we're so much into this digital age to where like people look at what other people are doing and like, look at their work compared to mine. It's like you can't compare yourself to other people. You have your race, they have theirs. And that's something that's very important. And also self-care is very important too.
I agree with you. I'm older than you, and I'm still fall prey to spending too much time on social media and doom scrolling
Mm-hmm.
and comparing, and then maybe beating myself up. And let me just tell you, I don't need help from anybody. My inner bully does a good job of making me feel bad sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
does affect my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I'm It's a tough one. I feel like we all kind of have that. I really don't know that I've talked to anybody that doesn't experience that at some
Right.
point, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe experiences it in small doses all the time.
Yeah.
I think finding tools, like you were saying, self love tools that help you move away from it, like when you start to smell it happening, when you
Right.
start to
Right.
see yourself maybe getting sucked into whatever narrative happens to be on TikTok or Instagram or wherever,
Yeah.
or you go into a Clubhouse room or a Twitter room and you feel that vibe is like all off.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to come up with ways to step away from it, step away from
Right.
that machine, and go inward. My
Mm-hmm.
tools are not perfect. They work for me most of the time, but not all the time. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it's popping music in my ears and walking around my new city and, pretending
Mm-hmm.
like I'm kind of in a movie, like I have like really good tunes
Right.
on and I'm walking around taking it in and taking
Mm-hmm.
pictures of things that I
Right.
find beautiful. I really stop and smell the roses, and
Yeah.
not just metaphorically. When I'm walking around and there's like a rose bush, I walk by and stick my nose in it. I'm not kidding you. Like, I try to really, and this comes from my marketing side. So I'm in the experience economy. I always have been. So for me, experience is all the senses. So I
Mm-hmm.
know I need to engage them. I know I need to listen. I need to hear things that are beautiful. So music that resonates with me. I need to look at things that make me feel good, like a beautiful day.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like to walk in the rain, like whatever. Maybe it's go for a jog. It's like whatever you
Right.
do, right, physically.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's about the smells too. There's a lot that take you back with smell.
Right.
So I like to engage all the senses. I love good food. So maybe, I might
Mm-hmm.
go get something so that my taste buds are engaged. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, when I'm not in that good place, I try to think of experiences and all of the senses and what things I can tap into that would make me feel good. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean crawling into a hole and eating a bag of chips. It means,
Right.
like bringing all of those elements in, maybe bringing that small bag of chips on your walk, but not the entire one and sitting in a corner. But that's
Mm-hmm.
some of the stuff that I do.
Yeah, right, exactly. Last but not least, where can people find you on social media and how can people support you?
So hollyshannon.com is my website. So if you want to build something, I can help you. I would love it so much if you would subscribe to Culture Factor. And like I said in the beginning, 98% of the world isn't even talking about this stuff. So if you don't
Mm-hmm.
want to try and explain it, or you want to learn more with me, I am learning with my listeners. I would love it if you subscribe to the show and share it with a friend. Starting at episode 85 is where I started talking about all this stuff. So if this is the
Mm-hmm.
conversation you want to be listening to, do that. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to join my journey of collaboration and NFT and my art and my show, go to mint.hollyshannon.com and get
Mm-hmm.
an NFT. Or find me on social media. But if you go to my website, you'll find all my social media tags. They're all just slightly different. So to
Mhm.
list them here might make people crazy, but I am on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. And so go find me. And I would love very much to have you in my real community and interacting with me.
All right, very, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Holly, for jumping onto the show. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and your knowledge. It's great to meet you. This has been really fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Asia. This has been amazing. And say hi to your dad for me, who introduced us. That is the coolest thing ever. And I hope I bump into both of you in maybe Clubhouse or something.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to click the bell for notifications. Also, follow me on my social media platforms and visit my website, ASIATHABIRD.com, and be on the lookout for more interviews involving Web3, NFTs, crypto, and the Metaverse.